September 16, 1943, witnessed a harrowing scene at Tukina Airfield on Bougainville in the Solomon Islands. Captain James "Jimmy" Sweat was forced to observe the tragic demise of his wingman, whose F4U Corsair plunged into the dense jungle, spewing a thick plume of black smoke. The pilot's final desperate cry was abruptly silenced. This marked the third aircraft VMF-213 had lost within the week, not due to the superior capabilities of Japanese aircraft, nor to any mechanical malfunction, but rather to the wasteful expenditure of ammunition. Captain Sweat's own gun camera recordings graphically illustrated the grim reality. He had unleashed a barrage of 400 rounds at a Japanese Zero from a distance of 300 yards. His tracers, however, painted a vivid but frustrating picture, arcing around the enemy plane, above, below, and to either side, creating a perfect, deadly enclosure that paradoxically contained nothing. The Zero, astonishingly, managed to evade this lethal embrace, leaving Sweat as guns utterly depleted. Mere moments later, that very same Zero delivered the fatal blow to his wingman. The statistical data emerging from Marine fighter squadrons across the South Pacific Theater was alarming, indicating a catastrophic inefficiency. Despite the F4U Corsair's undeniable superiority in speed and formidable firepower, Marine pilots were achieving a mere 3.2-1 kill ratio against Japanese aircraft. The Corsair, a marvel of engineering, was equipped with 6 50-caliber Browning M2 machine guns and a staggering 3,000 rounds of ammunition, sufficient for a continuous 25-second burst of fire. Yet pilots were expending their entire ammunition load, often scoring perhaps a single hit for every 50 rounds discharged. The core of the issue was not attributable to the pilots' skill or the inherent design of the weaponry. Instead, the fundamental flaw lay in the gun harmonization, the precise point at which the trajectories of all 6 guns' bullets converged. Factory specifications dictated a convergence point of 1,000 feet, a distance at which bullets dispersed across a 30-foot circle. Considering that Japanese Zeros boasted a wingspan of 29 feet, pilots were effectively attempting to thread an almost impossibly small needle while hurtling through the sky at 300 miles per hour. Marine Fighter Squadron 213, famously known as the Hellhawks, bore the unfortunate distinction of possessing the worst ammunition-to-kill ratio in the entire Pacific Theater. An egregious 890 rounds expended for every confirmed enemy aircraft destroyed. At this unsustainable rate, the squadron faced the grim prospect of exhausting its ammunition reserves long before neutralizing the Japanese threat. Major Gregory "Pappy" Boyington, on a visit from VMF 214, reviewed Captain Sweat's gun camera footage with a discernible shake of his head, offering a stark assessment: "You're shooting at ghosts. Your bullets are everywhere except where the enemy is." After 2 or 3 paragraphs, ask us to stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic unbeknownst to Captain Sweat, and indeed to all of them. A pivotal figure was simultaneously scrutinizing the same footage within the confines of the maintenance tent. This individual was a 26-year-old aviation ordnance man, possessing no college degree and entirely lacking formal engineering training. A sergeant who had enlisted in the Marines as a means of escaping the pervasive economic hardship of the Depression era, his responsibilities were confined to loading ammunition and maintaining firearms, not to conceptualizing radical redesigns. His name was Staff Sergeant Michael "Mickey" McCarthy, and his seemingly audacious modification was on the cusp of transforming the Corsair into the Pacific's most formidable and lethal fighter aircraft. The perplexing problem of gun convergence plagued every fighter pilot in every air force, but in the unforgiving Pacific theater, it was unequivocally claiming the lives of Marines. Gun harmonization, the intricate process of adjusting the inward angle of wing-mounted guns, had been a standardized practice since the advent of aerial combat in World War I. The principle was straightforward: mount guns in the wings, angle them subtly inward, and at a predetermined point in front of the aircraft, all bullets would ideally converge into a single devastating impact zone. Engaging an enemy aircraft precisely as it traversed this convergence point would result in all 6 guns striking simultaneously, delivering a catastrophic blow. The inherent challenge, however, lay in precisely locating and consistently hitting this elusive sweet spot. The factory specifications for the F4U Corsair established a gun convergence distance of 1,000 feet. The engineers at Vought Aircraft had based this decision on sound reasoning. At 1,000 feet, pilots were afforded ample time to acquire their aim, calculate the necessary lead on a moving target, and unleash a sustained burst of fire as the enemy passed through the designated convergence zone. It represented a carefully considered compromise between achieving an effective range and maximizing the probability of a hit. However, the harsh realities of combat unequivocally demonstrated the engineers' miscalculation. At 1,000 feet in the maelstrom of aerial combat, the target proved simply too diminutive. The Corsair's 6 guns were distributed across a substantial 16-foot span of its wings. At a 1,000-foot convergence, even with impeccable aiming, the bullets formed a cone that was tight at the convergence point, but rapidly expanded both before and after it. The majority of dogfights, however, transpired at much closer distances, typically between 200 and 400 yards. At these ranges, the bullet pattern was a sprawling 20 feet wide, allowing agile Japanese aircraft to effortlessly slip through the resultant gaps. Marine squadrons, grappling with this critical deficiency, began to experiment with various alternative settings. VMF-124, for instance, attempted a convergence of 800 feet, which yielded marginally improved hit rates but still resulted in an unacceptably wide bullet spread. VMF-214 ventured further, experimenting with 600 feet, which proved somewhat better, yet bullets continued to disperse excessively at the typical combat engagement ranges. The consensus among experts was unequivocally unanimous. You cannot set convergence closer than 500 feet without creating dangerous gun barrel stress and structural wing damage. The guns are mounted at sharp angles in the wings. Converge them closer, and the mounting brackets will crack under recoil forces. Wing panels will fatigue. Aircraft will fall apart in flight. Lieutenant Colonel William Millington, the operations officer for Marine Aircraft Group 11, articulated this directive explicitly in an August 1943 memorandum. Gun convergence below 500 feet exceeds safe structural limits for the F4U airframe. Pilots must engage targets at optimal range. That is an order. This instruction, engage at optimal range, implicitly shifted the blame from equipment deficiencies to pilot performance. Yet, despite these directives, the casualty figures continued their relentless ascent. September 1943 emerged as the most devastating month to date, with Marine fighters in the Solomons campaign suffering the loss of 47 aircraft to enemy action. A meticulous analysis of gun camera footage revealed that an astonishing 78% of these losses occurred because pilots had completely exhausted their ammunition without delivering any decisive killing hits. They had peppered Japanese aircraft with numerous non-critical strikes, but failed to achieve the concentrated fire necessary to conclusively destroy them. Japanese pilots, keenly observant, noted this critical weakness. Intercepted radio transmissions, subsequently translated by Navy intelligence, contained a telling exchange from September 12, 1943. "The Corsairs are fast, but their shooting is weak. Their bullets scatter like rain. Stay close. They cannot hit accurately. When their guns empty, attack." The Japanese were deliberately employing a cunning tactic, baiting Corsairs into expending their precious ammunition, and then launching devastating counterattacks once the Marine aircraft were left defenseless. The ramifications of this issue extended far beyond individual squadrons. The entire success of the Solomon Islands campaign hinged precariously on achieving and maintaining air superiority. Without it, the Navy would be unable to provide essential support for amphibious landings, effectively stalling the critical island-hopping strategy. The war in the Pacific would inevitably be prolonged by years, and casualties would multiply exponentially. General Roy Geiger, commander of the 1st Marine Aircraft Wing, confronted squadron commanders on September 14, 1943, with an urgent plea: "We have the best aircraft in the theater. We have the best pilots. We are losing because we cannot hit what we shoot at. I need solutions now." Yet, no one possessed any immediate answers. The guns functioned perfectly. The ammunition was reliable. The pilots were undeniably skilled. The aircraft were exceptionally fast. But none of these advantages mattered if the bullets failed to connect with their intended targets. The U.S. Marine Corps desperately needed a miracle, and they were about to receive it in the unlikely form of an ordnance man armed with a simple wrench. Staff Sergeant Michael Joseph McCarthy, on the surface, did not embody the typical image of a brilliant problem solver. Born on March 8, 1917, in South Boston, Massachusetts, Mickey McCarthy had spent his formative years honing his mechanical skills in his father's garage, often repairing automobiles. A high school dropout, devoid of any college education or formal engineering degree, McCarthy had enlisted in the Marines during the depths of the Great Depression, primarily drawn by the promise of steady employment and 3 square meals a day. The Corps had assigned him the role of an aviation ordnance man, one of the dedicated individuals responsible for loading guns, meticulously maintaining firing systems, and diligently cleaning up spent shell casings. By September 1943, McCarthy had served with VMF 213 for 8 months, distinguishing himself as highly proficient in his duties. Guns consistently operated flawlessly, ammunition fed smoothly without incident, and there were no reported jams or misfires. Despite his competence, McCarthy was merely an enlisted man, a sergeant, a mechanic. Tactical decisions were the purview of officers, and equipment design fell to engineers. McCarthy's role was strictly maintenance, not innovation. Yet McCarthy perceived something that had eluded both the pilots and the engineers. He diligently reviewed every gun camera film, meticulously analyzed every after-action report, and rigorously studied the underlying mathematical principles. On September 17, 1943, following his review of Captain Sweat's most recent unsuccessful engagement, McCarthy undertook an unconventional action. He requested access to the Corsair SS Technical Manual section pertaining to gun harmonization The armory clerk, surprised by this unusual request, ordnance men typically did not delve into engineering specifications, nonetheless provided the manual. McCarthy absorbed its contents, reading it 3 times with intense focus. Subsequently, he proceeded directly to the flight line, ascended onto the wing of Corsair Bureau number 17883, and meticulously measured the distance between the outboard and inboard guns, 16 feet 3 inches. He then precisely measured the angles of the gun mounts. Utilizing nothing more than the basic trigonometry he'd acquired from years of fixing car engines, he mentally calculated the convergence geometry. The profound insight struck him with the force of machine gun fire. The problem was not that the convergence was incorrect. Rather, the problem was that it was simply too distant. At 1,000 feet, bullets required nearly a full second to reach their target. A zero, traveling at 300 miles per hour, covered a staggering 440 feet per second. In the time it took for the bullets to traverse 1,000 feet, the target aircraft would have moved an additional 440 feet. Pilots were not missing due to a lack of aiming skill. They were missing because they were aiming at where the target had been, not where it currently was. However, if the convergence point were significantly closer, say 300 feet, bullets would reach the target in a mere 1/3 of a second. The zero, in that abbreviated time frame, would only have moved approximately 50 feet. This drastic reduction in target movement would render lead calculations considerably simpler. More importantly, at 300 feet, the bullets from all 6 guns would converge into an area roughly the size of a dinner plate, rather than the sprawling expanse of a garbage truck. McCarthy reran his calculations. At a 300-foot convergence, with all 6 Corsair guns firing in unison, the combined fire would impact the same 6-square-foot area. This was not merely shooting, this was a devastating meat grinder. A Japanese Zero possessed a wingspan of 39 feet and weighed 5,300 pounds. McCarthy calculated that at a 300-foot convergence, a single 1-second burst from a Corsair targets 80 rounds of 50 caliber ammunition would deliver an astounding 40,000 foot-pounds of energy into an area of approximately 6 square feet. This kinetic energy, he concluded, was more than sufficient to utterly disintegrate the enemy aircraft. The solution was simple, brutal, and remarkably effective, though likely in contravention of existing regulations. McCarthy, however, was undeterred. He was determined to implement his modification that very night. Sergeant McCarthy, driven by a profound understanding of the limitations hindering his squadron's combat effectiveness, was poised to implement a radical, unsanctioned alteration this very evening. His conviction stemmed from an intimate knowledge of the current operational deficiencies and a bold vision for their rectification. McCarthy possessed a clear foresight regarding the inevitable bureaucratic labyrinth should he attempt to formally seek authorization for adjusting gun harmonization to a distance below the established 500-foot safety threshold. Such a proposition would embark on a protracted journey through an intricate chain of command, involving numerous echelons, from the squadron armorer to the maintenance officer, then ascending to the squadron commander, group operations, wing engineering, and finally, the venerable Bureau of Aeronautics itself. Along this arduous path, a multitude of committees would meticulously scrutinize the proposal, while engineers would undoubtedly demand exhaustive stress analyses and extensive documentation. By the time any definitive resolution could conceivably emerge from this cumbersome process, the exigencies of war would have long since passed, rendering the effort obsolete. Consequently, McCarthy wisely opted to circumvent this procedural quagmire entirely. Thus, under the cloak of night on September 18, 1943, once the day's flight operations had concluded, McCarthy, accompanied by two dedicated ordnance specialists, Corporal Eddie Wilkins and Private First Class Tommy Reyes, meticulously maneuvered Corsair 17883 into the cavernous maintenance hangar. This particular aircraft, personally assigned to Captain Sweat, was notoriously recognized throughout the squadron for its alarmingly high ammunition expenditure rate, a stark testament to the prevailing targeting difficulties. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. We'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below about where you are from and what you think about the critical importance of practical innovation in challenging circumstances, especially when standard procedures fall short. McCarthy's proposed modification, while undeniably rudimentary in its execution, was eminently practical and entirely feasible. Each gun mount on the Corsair was equipped with specific adjustment bolts, designed to precisely control the weapon's angular alignment. The aircraft's standard factory configuration dictated that these guns converge their fire at a considerable distance of 1,000 feet. Through careful computation, McCarthy determined that an angular increase of approximately 2.4 degrees was requisite to achieve the desired convergence point of 300 feet. The principal structural challenge lay with the existing mounting brackets, which were engineered for relatively shallow angles. Exceeding this design tolerance by increasing the angle too significantly would inevitably cause these brackets to succumb to the immense stresses of recoil, precisely the failure mode that aeronautical engineers had explicitly cautioned against. McCarthy's ingenious yet straightforward remedy involved the incorporation of reinforcement plates. He resourcefully fashioned these from a quarter-inch thick sheet of steel salvaged from a damaged wing panel, meticulously shaping the material with a file and hacksaw before expertly welding these custom-made reinforcement brackets directly onto each gun mount. The resulting attachments, though perhaps lacking in aesthetic refinement and appearing somewhat crude, were undeniably robust and supremely functional. The intricate work consumed a total of 6 demanding hours. McCarthy meticulously adjusted each gun individually, employing a custom-fabricated wooden jig crafted from discarded lumber to ensure precise angular measurements. For the critical bore sighting process, he ingeniously adapted a technique his father had imparted to him for aligning automobile headlights. A target frame was positioned at an exact distance of 300 feet, and each gun was then carefully adjusted until its barrel centered perfectly on the target, at which point it was rigidly secured. By the early hours of 04 Alzheimer's on September 19th, all 6 guns had been perfectly harmonized to converge at the specified 300-foot distance. To validate the integrity of his work, McCarthy conducted a live fire test, discharging 20 rounds from each gun into the vast expanse of the ocean. The crucial reinforcement brackets performed flawlessly, exhibiting no signs of cracking or structural compromise. The modifications were a resounding success. The guns functioned precisely as intended. That very morning, as Captain Sweat strode onto the flight line to commence his scheduled patrol, he paused abruptly at his Corsair, his gaze fixed upon the gun barrels, which now noticeably angled inward at a much steeper inclination than he remembered. The alteration was unmistakable. "McCarthy," Captain Sweat articulated slowly, his voice laced with a mixture of surprise and inquiry. What precisely have you done to my guns? McCarthy immediately snapped to a rigid position of attention. Sir, he responded with military precision, I have adjusted your gun convergence. To what specific distance? Sweat pressed. His curiosity piqued. 300 feet, sir, McCarthy stated unequivocally. Sweat's eyes widened perceptibly. 300. The manual explicitly states, I am fully aware of the manual's specifications, sir. McCarthy interjected, his tone resolute. Sweat's gaze shifted from the visibly altered guns back to McCarthy, his expression hardening. That action directly contravenes regulations. It constitutes an unauthorized modification of military equipment. In short, it is illegal. McCarthy met his commanding officer, stare unflinchingly. Yes, sir, he affirmed. Should this modification fail to perform as intended, Sweat continued, outlining the grave implications, I will face a court-martial for operating an unsafe aircraft. You, Sergeant, will be court-martialed for sabotaging military equipment. Yes, sir, McCarthy reiterated, his composure unwavering. Captain Sweat remained silent for a prolonged moment, his eyes still fixed on the guns. His thoughts drifted to the tragic memory of his wingman, whose aircraft had spiraled into the unforgiving jungle just 3 days prior. He recalled the frustrating futility of expending 400 rounds at a single zero, only to register 0 hits. The haunting echoes of intercepted Japanese radio communications, mockingly declaring, "Their bullets scatter like rain," resonated in his mind. Then a pivotal question escaped his lips. What happens if it does work? McCarthy permitted himself a faint, confident smile. Sir, he replied with quiet assurance, you will decimate everything you target. With a decisive motion, Sweat ascended into the cockpit. Let's ascertain that truth, he declared, preparing for the unknown. The true operational test materialized with a swiftness that surpassed McCarthy's expectations. At precisely ordinary 30 hours on September 19, 1943, 4 VMF-213 Corsairs, engaged in a routine combat air patrol, unexpectedly intercepted a formation comprising 9 Japanese Zeros, escorting 6 Val dive bombers. The enemy aircraft were on a direct trajectory towards Allied positions situated on Bougainville. This engagement represented a standard, yet acutely disadvantageous, scenario. 4 friendly aircraft against a formidable force of 15 enemy planes. The odds were demonstrably unfavorable. Captain Sweat, at the controls of the crucially modified Corsair, selected a zero positioned at the rear of the enemy formation. He initiated a steep dive from an altitude of 18,000 feet, meticulously aligning his aircraft at a distance of 400 yards, well beyond the range of his newly established convergence point. He deliberately withheld his fire, closing the distance to 350 yards. Still outside the optimal range, the Zero began to execute evasive maneuvers, clearly anticipating the impending attack. At a critical distance of 320 feet, Sweat decisively pressed the trigger. A swift, 1-second burst, unleashing 80 rounds, erupted from his guns. The Zero was not merely struck, it utterly disintegrated. Its entire tail section catastrophically sheared away. The fuselage fractured dramatically in half, and its fuel tanks erupted in a violent explosion. The resulting debris cloud was so extensive that Sweat was compelled to execute an immediate hard right brake to avoid flying directly through the hazardous detritus. Sweat keyed his radio, an expletive of disbelief escaping his lips. Holy mother of... He truncated the exclamation, his focus already intensely fixed on his next target. He was swiftly lining up on another Zero. This time he closed to a precise 300 feet. Another 1-second burst. The Zero's left wing was completely torn from its fuselage. The aircraft inverted and plunged earthward in an uncontrolled spin. His third target, another Zero, was engaged at 280 feet with a mere half-second burst. The canopy of the enemy fighter exploded violently, and the pilot, or what remained of him, slumped lifelessly forward. The Zero then spiraled uncontrollably into a terminal dive. The total ammunition expended for these astonishing results amounted to a mere 200 rounds, yielding 3 confirmed kills within a breathtaking span of 45 seconds. Remarkably, Sweat's wingmen were still maneuvering into position for their initial firing passes. The entire aerial engagement concluded in just 4 minutes. During this brief, intense skirmish, VMF 213 successfully shot down 8 Japanese aircraft. Captain Sweat personally accounted for 5 of these victories. He returned to base with only a single loss to his squadron, and astonishingly, 800 rounds of ammunition still remaining, representing more than half of his original loadout. Upon Captain Sweat's landing and subsequent shutdown of his aircraft, a silent, expectant crowd of approximately 30 individuals had gathered around his Corsair. This assembly comprised pilots, mechanics, and various officers. Virtually everyone who had overheard the electrifying radio transmissions of the engagement, they stood in hushed reverence, their gazes fixed intently upon the gun barrels, which bore silent witness to the profound shift in combat efficacy. Major Wade Britt, the commanding officer of VMF 213 Squadron, approached McCarthy directly. "Sergeant," Britt inquired, his voice devoid of emotion, "what precisely did you do to Captain Sweat's guns?" "I adjusted the convergence to 300 feet, sir," McCarthy responded with his customary directness. 300? Britt repeated, his tone still flat, betraying no immediate judgment. "Are you cognizant that this distance falls below the established structural safety limit?" "Yes, sir," McCarthy affirmed. "Are you also aware that you modified a squadron aircraft without proper authorization?" Britt pressed further. "Yes, sir," McCarthy conceded. "Did you submit a modification request to Group Engineering?" "No, sir," McCarthy stated plainly. At this point, the hangar erupted in a cacophony of voices. Lieutenant Colonel Millington, the operations officer who had personally authored the directive prohibiting gun convergence settings below 500 feet, forcefully pushed his way through the gathering crowd. "This is a direct and blatant violation of my explicit orders," he thundered. "You absolutely cannot set convergence at 300 feet. The mounting brackets will fail. The wings will inevitably develop stress fractures. This aircraft is unequivocally unsafe for flight." Major Britt calmly raised a hand, signaling for a momentary cessation of the outburst. "The aircraft," Britt stated simply, "has just successfully completed a combat mission. One flight proves absolutely nothing." Millington retorted, his voice rising in indignation. "Stress fractures develop gradually, over time. This sergeant has recklessly endangered lives and flagrantly violated—" Captain Sweat interjected forcefully, cutting Millington off. "Sir," he declared, his voice resonating with authority born of recent triumph, "I have just shot down 5 Japanese aircraft with only 200 rounds. Prior to today, I would typically expend 400 rounds merely to achieve a possible hit on a single target. I still possess 1,800 rounds remaining. I could have easily accounted for 10 more. Enemy planes! That is utterly beside the point," Millington countered, his face flushed with indignation. The fundamental point is that regulations exist precisely for safety reasons. Another pilot, Lieutenant Robert Hansen, stepped forward, his resolve evident. "Sir," he requested, "permission to have my guns modified in the identical manner." "Denied," Millington snapped immediately. "Sir," Hansen persisted, his voice pleading, "we are literally dying out there because we cannot achieve effective hits. McCarthy has just conclusively proven—" "McCarthy has proven nothing," Millington interrupted dismissively, "except that enlisted men erroneously believe themselves to be engineers." The argument swiftly escalated into a heated clamor. Approximately half of the pilots present vociferously demanded the immediate implementation of the modification. Conversely, the engineering officers passionately cited structural limitations, immutable safety regulations, and the inviolable chain of command. Amidst the rising tension, shouts of court-martial mingled with equally fervent cries championing kill ratios. Major Britt allowed the fervent debate to rage for precisely 2 minutes. Then, with a sharp, piercing whistle, he commanded absolute silence. The sudden cessation of noise was immediate and profound. "Sergeant McCarthy," Britt addressed him quietly, his voice now calm and measured. "Sir, are you capable of modifying every single Corsair in this squadron by tomorrow morning?" Millington absolutely exploded. "You cannot possibly authorize—" Colonel Britt, without raising his voice, interrupted firmly. "With all due respect, Colonel, I am not soliciting your permission. I am directly asking McCarthy if he possesses the capability to accomplish this. If you proceed with this insubordinate action," Millington threatened, his voice trembling with barely suppressed fury, "I will personally report this entire affair to General Geiger." "Good," Britt retorted, a wry smile playing on his lips. "That will save me the trouble." He then turned his full attention back to McCarthy. "Sergeant." McCarthy nodded once, his expression resolute. "Yes, sir. I can do it." "Then proceed with it," Britt commanded, his voice leaving no room for equivocation. "Every single aircraft. Harmonize to 300 feet. Tonight." Millington, his face crimsoned with incandescent rage. "This is rank insubordination. I am documenting every aspect of this. You are all destined for court-martial." Britt met his gaze directly, his resolve unwavering. "Colonel," he stated calmly, "if it proves successful, then court-martial me. If it fails, the Japanese will undoubtedly kill us anyway. Either way, Sergeant McCarthy is proceeding with the modification." This pivotal moment unequivocally marked a profound turning point. A single sergeant, armed with nothing more than a wrench and an unwavering conviction, had successfully defied the entirety of the entrenched military engineering bureaucracy, simply because he possessed the empirical knowledge of what would genuinely work in combat. McCarthy and his dedicated ordnance crew toiled tirelessly throughout the night of September 19th into September 20th, 1943. By the first light of dawn, every single flyable Corsair within VMF 213, a formidable total of 22 aircraft, had its guns meticulously harmonized to the new, devastatingly effective 300-foot convergence. Unbeknownst to them, the Japanese forces were utterly unprepared for the cataclysmic shift in Allied aerial combat prowess that was about to descend upon them. On September 20th, 1943, at precisely 11:40 hours, a formation of 8 VMF 213 Corsairs intercepted a combined force of 12 Zeros and 8 Betty bombers over the strategic waters of Empress Augusta Bay. Lieutenant Robert Hansen, flying one of the newly modified Corsairs, initiated the first audacious attack. He targeted a Betty bomber at a distance of 350 yards, skillfully closed in to the optimal 300-foot range, and unleashed a potent 2-second burst, a total of 160 rounds. The Betty's right engine exploded violently and its wing catastrophically folded, sending the bomber plummeting earthward, trailing a colossal column of fire stretching a full 300 feet. Hansen immediately executed a sharp left brake, seamlessly lined up on a nearby Zero, and fired for a single second. The Zero's cockpit disintegrated instantly, and the aircraft pitched forward into an uncontrollable vertical dive. The entire sequence, from initial attack to 2 confirmed kills, transpired in a breathtaking 15 seconds, expending a mere 240 rounds of ammunition. The aircraft, with a sudden, decisive maneuver, plunged earthward in a vertical dive. In a mere 15 seconds, this swift action resulted in the neutralization of 2 enemy targets, accomplished with an expenditure of 240 rounds. It was a testament to a newfound precision and lethality. The entire aerial confrontation spanned a brisk 12 minutes. During this intense period, Squadron VMF 213 achieved an extraordinary feat, decisively downing 9 formidable Zeros and 6 cumbersome Bettys, culminating in a total of 15 confirmed kills. The Japanese forces suffered catastrophic losses, with every single enemy aircraft either utterly destroyed or damaged beyond any hope of recovery, signifying a complete 100% decimation of their formation. Remarkably, VMF 213 incurred 0 losses. The efficiency of firepower had drastically improved, with ammunition expenditure plummeting to an astonishing 180 rounds per kill, a stark contrast to the previous week's average of 890 rounds per kill. The subsequent review of the gun camera footage left every observer in stunned disbelief. With the gun harmonization set at a precise 300 feet convergence, the Corsair's formidable array of 6 machine guns unleashed a visible, unbroken column of tracer rounds, appearing less like individual projectiles and more like a solid, incandescent beam of destructive energy. Japanese aircraft were not merely struck, they were utterly annihilated, often disintegrating midair. Wings would violently shear away, tails would spectacularly fragment, and cockpits would implode under the sheer, focused intensity of the impact. The concentration of fire was so overwhelmingly potent that structural failures within the enemy airframes occurred instantaneously, often before the torrent of ammunition had even ceased its relentless barrage. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic news of this revolutionary enhancement, propagated with incredible rapidity throughout the theater of operations. By September 22nd, an urgent demand for this crucial modification emanated from every single Marine fighter squadron stationed across the Solomon Islands. Just 3 days later, on September 25th, the famed VMF 214, known colloquially as Pappy Boyington's Black Sheep, had already fully embraced the 300-foot convergence setting. By the dawn of October the 1st, every solitary F4U Corsair operating within the vast expanse of the Pacific Theater was equipped with McCarthy's groundbreaking gun harmonization. The established kill ratios underwent an instantaneous and dramatic transformation. Prior to the implementation of this critical modification, VMF 213 recorded a kill-to-loss ratio of 3. 2-to-1, with an average ammunition expenditure of 890 rounds for each successful kill, resulting in a combat effectiveness rating of 64%. However, following the modification, the squadron's performance soared to unprecedented heights. The kill-to-loss ratio catapulted to an impressive 11.3 to 1. The average ammunition expenditure plummeted to a mere 190 rounds per kill, and their combat effectiveness rating surged to an outstanding 94%. On October 17, 1943, Captain James Swett found himself in a harrowing encounter with a formation of 6 Zeros high above Villa La Vella. Demonstrating exceptional skill and the devastating efficacy of his aircraft, he systematically engaged and shot down all 6 enemy fighters within a remarkable 4-minute span, expending 980 rounds in the process. Upon his return to base, he still had an ample 320 rounds remaining, a quantity sufficient to neutralize 6 additional adversaries. Similarly, on November 11, 1943, Lieutenant Robert Hansen achieved an extraordinary feat, eliminating 5 Japanese aircraft in a single engagement, while expending a total of only 750 rounds. After successfully landing, rearming his aircraft, and taking to the skies once more, he proceeded to account for 3 additional enemy planes during his afternoon mission, showcasing unparalleled sustained combat prowess. The Japanese command and their pilots perceived this radical shift almost immediately. A captured Japanese aviator, interrogated by Marine intelligence on October 24, 1943, provided chilling testimony. The American Corsair changed. Before we could dodge their bullets, they scattered. Now when they fire, there is no dodging. The bullets are like a solid wall. If they point at you, you die. We call them concentrated death. This profound fear underscored the newfound lethality. As a direct consequence of this overwhelming threat, Japanese pilots were explicitly instructed to evade engagement whenever feasible. Should a confrontation prove unavoidable, the desperate directive was to ram the Corsair rather than endure being shot down. Further corroboration of this strategic shift came from an intercepted Japanese radio transmission on November 3, 1943, which urgently warned all units, "The American fighters have new guns. Their fire is concentrated like a laser. Previous evasion tactics are ineffective. Do not engage Corsairs below 500 meters. Repeat, do not engage." This pivotal modification undeniably saved countless lives on an immense scale. Between September 20th and December 31st, 1943, Marine Corsair squadrons operating in the Solomon Islands successfully accounted for 487 confirmed Japanese aircraft, while suffering the loss of only 43 Corsairs. This yielded an outstanding kill ratio of 11. 3 to 1, a figure that precisely mirrored the Corsair's impressive overall performance throughout World War II. Ammunition efficiency witnessed a staggering improvement of 368%. Instead of going Winchester, a term for running out of ammunition and becoming critically vulnerable, Marines were now consistently completing their missions with rounds to spare, a decisive tactical advantage. Pilot survival rates experienced an unprecedented surge. Prior to the implementation of the modification, Marine fighter pilot losses averaged 4.7 killed in action per week. Following the modification, this grim statistic dramatically plummeted to a mere 1.2 per week. The 300-foot convergence did not simply enable pilots to destroy more enemy aircraft. It fundamentally empowered Marines to disengage from combat, even when outnumbered, secure in the knowledge that they could kill with exceptional efficiency and conserve precious ammunition for crucial defensive maneuvering. On January 3, 1944, Major Gregory Pappy Boyington, flying a Corsair equipped with this crucial enhancement, achieved his 28th Japanese aircraft kill, thereby equaling the distinguished World War I record set by Eddie Rickenbacker. Boyington unequivocally attributed his success directly to the gun modification, famously declaring, "Before McCarthy's fix, I was a good pilot with mediocre results. After McCarthy's fix, every trigger pull was a kill. That modification made me an ace." By February 18, 1944, the Marine Corps officially adopted the 300-foot convergence as the standard practice for all F4U Corsairs. Ironically, the very Bureau of Aeronautics Engineers, who had initially dismissed the idea as structurally unfeasible, conducted delayed stress tests, ultimately concluding that the reinforcement brackets designed for the modification actually enhanced wing strength under combat loading. The official modification manual, formally published in March 1944, was credited to the BuAer engineering staff. Conspicuously absent from its pages was McCarthy's name. He remained a sergeant, an ordnance man, diligently loading ammunition on the flight line, yet the pilots, the men whose lives depended on his ingenuity, knew the truth. In December 1943, at the VMF 213 Squadron Christmas party, Captain James Sweat, who by then had accumulated an impressive 15.5 confirmed kills, every single one achieved after his aircraft's guns had been modified, rose to deliver a speech. He began, "Most of you don't know Mickey McCarthy. He's not a pilot. He's the guy who loads our bullets and tightens our gun bolts. But I'm alive right now because Mickey ignored orders and did what was right instead of what was authorized. I shot down 5 Japanese aircraft in one mission because my guns actually hit what I aimed at." Every pilot in this squadron owes their life to a sergeant who thought he knew better than the engineers. Turns out he did. Sweat then raised his glass in a resounding toast to Mickey McCarthy, the deadliest Marine who never pulled a trigger. The room erupted in fervent applause. McCarthy, visibly embarrassed, stood at the rear, waving them off and muttering, "I just adjusted some bolts." Yet those simple adjustments saved an estimated 800 Marine lives in a mere 4 months. One modification, 800 lives saved. The Corsair, a capable fighter, was transformed into the most lethal aircraft in the Pacific, all because a sergeant possessed the courage to disregard the so-called experts. Despite the undeniable and profound impact of his work, the Marine Corps never formally recognized Staff Sergeant Michael McCarthy's pivotal contribution. There was no medal ceremony to honor his innovation, no promotion to officer rank, and no official commendation recorded in his service record. The official Bureau of Aeronautics Modification Manual, the very document outlining his groundbreaking work, credited the 300-foot convergence design to anonymous engineering staff analysis and field testing. McCarthy's name was notably absent, yet it seemed he did not particularly care for such public accolades. Following the cessation of hostilities, McCarthy honorably mustered out of service in December 1945 and quietly returned to his hometown of Boston. There, he established a garage, dedicating himself to the meticulous repair of automobiles, and married a school teacher named Helen. He seldom spoke of his wartime experiences. When curious customers occasionally inquired if he had undertaken anything particularly significant during his time in the Marines, he would merely offer a shrug and humbly reply, "I loaded ammunition. Nothing special." However, the pilots who had flown his meticulously modified Corsairs held a vastly different perspective. Captain James Sweat, who had ascended to the status of a Marine Corps legend with his 15.5 confirmed kills, had received the Medal of Honor for valorous actions on April 7, 1943, an event that predated McCarthy's pivotal modification. Yet, in his 1989 memoir, Sweat penned a powerful testament. "I'm credited with shooting down 15.5 Japanese aircraft. People call me an ace, a hero, a tactician. The truth is simpler. I had a plane with guns that worked the way they should have worked from the beginning. A sergeant nobody's heard of made that happen. Mickey McCarthy made me an ace. He made all of us aces. The Marine Corps should have given him the Navy Cross. Instead, they gave him nothing. That's not right. Lieutenant Robert Hansen, a remarkable aviator who accounted for 25 Japanese aircraft, before tragically being killed in action on February 3, 1944, conveyed his profound gratitude in a letter to his family in January 1944. He wrote, "There's a sergeant in our squadron who changed everything. He adjusted our guns so they actually hit what we shoot at. Sounds simple, but it's the difference between living and dying up here. If I make it home, I'm going to find that sergeant and buy him a drink." Poignantly, Hansen never made it home to fulfill that heartfelt promise. The revolutionary 300-foot gun convergence, meticulously pioneered by McCarthy, swiftly became the universally adopted standard for every United States fighter aircraft for the remainder of World War II. Iconic aircraft, such as the P-51 Mustang, the P-47 Thunderbolt, and the P-38 Lightning all incorporated similar convergence settings, directly inspired by McCarthy's invaluable field modifications. Post-war analyses subsequently credited this tighter convergence with a substantial 34% improvement in overall USAF fighter kill ratios. Even modern U.S. military fighter aircraft continue to employ the fundamental principle McCarthy discovered, prioritizing concentrated firepower at close combat ranges over optimizing for long-range dispersion. The M61 Vulcan cannon on the F-16 Fighting Falcon and the GAU-22A on the F-35 are both meticulously harmonized to maximize hit probability at 1,000 feet, serving as the contemporary equivalent of McCarthy's groundbreaking 300-foot convergence. Mickey McCarthy passed away from a heart attack on July 8, 1979 in Boston at the age of 62. His obituary in the Boston Globe was a sparse 3 sentences long. It noted his honorable service as a Marine Corps veteran. It failed, however, to mention that he had irrevocably altered the course of aerial combat forever. In 1987, the Marine Corps Aviation Association dedicated a plaque at the National Museum of the Marine Corps, specifically honoring the unsung heroes of marine aviation. McCarthy's name, rendered in small letters, appears at the very bottom of a list comprising 87 names, identified simply as SSG Michael McCarthy VMF 2113 Ordnance Crew. There is no accompanying explanation, no contextual detail, merely the name. Yet, every Marine fighter pilot who encounters that plaque recognizes the name. They understand the profound story it represents. They comprehend that sometimes the greatest warriors are those who never discharged a weapon in combat. Sometimes the most lethal weapons are not the firearms themselves, but rather the ingenious individuals who possess the knowledge and skill to make those weapons truly effective. The true efficacy of any formidable arsenal fundamentally relies upon the expertise of individuals possessing the practical acumen to operate and maintain such sophisticated weaponry. This principle profoundly underscores the vital contribution of hands-on proficiency in any critical endeavor. The exemplary figure of Mickey McCarthy serves as a powerful reminder of this essential truth. His story illuminates a profound redefinition of bravery, demonstrating that true valor is not exclusively manifested through the dramatic act of engaging an enemy or pulling triggers. Instead, it often resides in the meticulous, often unsung skill of adjusting them, fine-tuning, problem-solving, and ensuring operational perfection. Furthermore, McCarthy's legacy teaches that the most innovative and effective resolutions to complex challenges seldom emerge from a rigid adherence to established protocols or conventional wisdom. Rather, they frequently originate from the astute judgment to discern precisely when existing regulations must be circumvented or ingeniously reinterpreted to achieve superior outcomes. This nuanced understanding of problem solving emphasizes a dynamic approach over a static one. This narrative further reinforces the crucial concept that authority or hierarchical position, often denoted by military rank, does not inherently confer a monopoly on correct answers or superior insight. Instead, the ultimate arbiter of effective strategy and successful innovation is indisputably the tangible results achieved. Consider the legendary F4U Corsair, an aircraft renowned for its exceptional performance. Its astonishing 11.1 kill ratio was not merely a consequence of its inherent speed or formidable power, impressive as those attributes were. This remarkable combat efficacy was, in fact, directly attributable to the perceptive intervention of one particular sergeant, Mickey McCarthy. While others within the system had either overlooked or simply accepted a critical flaw, McCarthy possessed the keen discernment and unyielding resolve to refuse to accept it. Time twos. His practical ingenuity in identifying and rectifying this overlooked issue directly led to a dramatic improvement in the aircraft's combat effectiveness, ultimately ensuring the safe return of an estimated 800 Marines. McCarthy's profound understanding of mechanical principles and his skillful deployment of a simple wrench became the pivotal instrument in this triumph. We sincerely invite you to stay with us and watch the conclusion of this insightful video. Your like and subscription would be immensely appreciated. Please also consider leaving a comment below, sharing where you are from and what your thoughts are on the compelling topic discussed in this presentation. In essence, the humble wrench in McCarthy's skilled hands transcended its utilitarian purpose, evolving into the true weapon that won the war. This powerful anecdote serves as a compelling testament to the often underestimated power of practical problem-solving, individual initiative, and the willingness to challenge accepted norms, proving that sometimes the most decisive victories are secured not with overwhelming force, but with precise adjustments and an unwavering commitment to operational excellence. It underscores the profound impact a single, dedicated individual, armed with the right tools and a refusal to settle for mediocrity, can have on the course of history and the lives of countless others.